Good morning, Facebook community, and welcome back to UCI Mind's monthly Facebook Live series, Ask the Doc, Alzheimer's Research Today. I'm Chelsea Cox, Associate Director of Education for UCI Mind, which is one of 32 congressionally designated Alzheimer's disease research centers in the country, and the only center right here in Orange County on UC Irvine's campus. We're a collection of over 100 faculty, staff, and trainees who've really dedicated their lives to better understanding Alzheimer's disease and related dementias and how people can live brain-healthy lives. Now, this is episode 10 of our series, and today we are going to discuss Alzheimer's disease and dementia in the oldest old with Dr. Maria Corrada. Welcome, Dr. Corrada.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for being here. Now, Dr. Corrada did her undergraduate training at University of Puerto Rico, and she did her master's in biostatistics and doctorate in epidemiology from Johns Hopkins University. She currently serves as professor of neurology and epidemiology in the UC Irvine School of Medicine. Dr. Corrada is co-principal investigator of the 90+ study, which is a longitudinal study of aging and dementia in over 1,800 older adults aged 90 and older. And she's also co-principal investigator of Life After 90, which is a multiethnic cohort of individuals, again, 90 and older in Northern California. Dr. Corrada's research focuses on identifying risk and protective factors for dementia, and in particular, improving understanding of physical and cognitive health in individuals 90 and older, or the oldest old. Now, Dr. Corrada, again, thank you for being here today. It's really an honor to have you as our guest expert. And for those who are attending live, if this is your first time attending our Facebook Live series, the way it works is it's an open Q&A with you and our guest expert today being Dr. Corrada. So I will get things started by asking Dr. Corrada a few questions. And then as you have questions that come up, you can go ahead and type them there in the comments box, and we'll get to as many questions as we have time for. Please do remember that whatever you type will be linked to your name and visible to other people. So try to keep your questions more general rather than personal, and please post responsibly. All right, so let's go ahead and get started.
Okay.
First, Dr. Corrada, I'm hoping that you could tell us a little bit more about the research study, this study that's really received a lot of media attention because of all of the important findings, the 90+ study. Just tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, the 90+ study is actually led by me and Dr. Claudia Cawas, a geriatric neurologist here at UCI Irvine. And we started the study almost 17 years ago in 2003. And the study actually started with survivors from an earlier study called the Leisure World Cohort Study, which was at the time investigators from USC, who some of them are actually working with us now, sent questionnaires to all the residents of a retirement community here in Southern Orange County called Leisure World. And about 14,000 of the residents from that resident community answered that mail questionnaire. And what we did was that anybody that was still alive at 90 and older in January 1st of 2003, we invited them to be part of the 90+ study. And after that, so every year as people were turning 90, we invited them to be part of the study. And we managed to enroll over 1,800 people that way from that original cohort. And some of the goals at the time was to sort of try to identify or sort of understand the lives of people at that age. What are the rates of dementia? What are the risk and protective factors for dementia? What are the causes of dementia at that age? And so we do a lot of procedures in that study. We ask our participants to do a lot. We do physical exams, we do neurological exams, test their gait, their walking speed, their balance, blood pressure. We do also a lot of cognitive testing their memory and their cognitive abilities. We also have started doing some brain imaging, and we also have a very important component, which is the brain donation program from that study. And it's one of the parts of the study that we think we've learned the most from.
Okay.
So it's sort of the ultimate gift to research that the participants let us actually take advantage of. And so the reasons that we thought that it was important to study the oldest old was that that segment of the population, 90 and older, are the fastest growing segment of the population. It's a demographic that's growing very fast here in the US and many other countries around the world. And we didn't really know much about people at that age. And we're estimating that by the middle of the century, there's going to be about 10 million people 90 and older. Wow. Which is about 4 or 5 times more than we had at the beginning of the century. So that group of people, that demographic, is expanding very quickly, in part due to increases on life expectancy, the baby boomer population getting older. And we didn't really know much about that segment of the population. Most of the studies on aging didn't really include that many people at that age. So what we did is that we designed the study specifically to look at that population and sort of design it in a way that could accommodate the needs of the people at that age. So we see participants every 6 months. We see them frequently because we know that they're changing, their physical and their mental abilities are changing very quickly. So we see them every 6 months. And even though these participants in the early 1980s, when they were part of that other Leisure World cohort study, they lived here in Orange County. By the time that they joined our study, they actually lived all over the US. So we actually travel and see them wherever they are. And because if we limited the study to only the people that could come to our research center, we would not really have a good representation of people at that age. Sure. So we actually have the flexibility, and if people cannot participate in person, we talk to them over the phone, and we go and see them at their home wherever they are. Or if they have the ability, they come to our research. That's great. Our research study. So there was really not much information of people at that age about how much dementia there was at that age and what were the causes of dementia at that age, and that's why we decided to start the study.
Okay. Now you mentioned people 90 and older are the fastest growing segment of the population, and that one of those reasons is because the baby boomers are reaching older and older ages. What other factors have you found from your research that are associated with living to age 90 or longevity?
Yes. So because we had the information from all the almost 14,000 people that answered that questionnaire back in the 80s, we were able to try to study what are the characteristics of people that help them live very long. Some of the things that we found is that, for example, physical activity, participating in exercise, walking, going to the gym, vigorous exercise, that helps people live longer. As little as 15 minutes a day or even more, 30, 45 minutes, participating in these activities every day help people live longer. Also, participation in other activities, what we call leisure activities. So gardening, playing games, getting together with friends, socializing, going to the theater. That also, participation in those activities, the more you take part in those activities, the longer a person lives. Other things that we've been able to look at is moderate intake of alcohol also helps, moderate intakes of caffeine. Some things that we thought we were gonna be able to find in relation to living longer were vitamin intake. Like we looked at intakes of vitamin A, C, and E, but that doesn't seem to be related to living longer. Okay. More recently, we were looking at also what we call positive attitude. So we had information about sort of their outlook in life, and people that say that they felt like their life had a meaning, or they were still able to enjoy things that they used to enjoy when they were younger. The more the positive, or the better the attitude towards life, the longer a person lived. So some of those are some of the very interesting findings that we've had from our study. Okay. And you mentioned moderate intake of caffeine and alcohol. What is considered moderate? I think in caffeine it was about 2 cups of coffee a day, and alcohol 1 or 2 glasses of alcohol a day. It's what we found.
Now, on the flip side, those are some of the things that you mentioned. So exercise, social engagement, cognitive activity. diet, and this positive outlook on life are some of the things associated with longevity. So on the flip side, what are some of the things that are associated then in the oldest old of dementia or Alzheimer's disease?
So yes, one of the major risk factors of dementia and Alzheimer's disease or any other types of dementia, especially at this age, is age. So when we started our study, we didn't really know what was the risk of dementia in the oldest old. We knew that in younger people, the risk of dementia essentially increases exponentially and doubles about every 5 years before age 90. Unfortunately, what we found in our study is that that seems to be the case even after 90, and that continues to go up with age. So age is by far the strongest risk factor for Alzheimer's disease or other types of dementia. But what's interesting too is that in the oldest old, Alzheimer's disease is not the only important factor. What we have found is that people that died with dementia, and we have been able to actually examine their brain after that through our autopsy program, is that people that die with dementia, many times they do have sort of the hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease, the plaques and tangles. So these are sort of abnormal accumulations of proteins in the brain. But we also see a lot of other abnormalities that cause dementia. So we have things like strokes, large strokes, small strokes, even a microscopic infarct. So infarcts that can only be seen under the microscope. We see also other abnormalities of the vessels, so the large vessels and small vessels, atherosclerosis, arteriolosclerosis. We also have white matter disease, or sort of abnormalities sort of in the deeper parts of the brain, that white matter. Other things that like hippocampal sclerosis, another type of dementia that's very common in the oldest old, which is sort of loss of neurons in specific parts of the brain or the hippocampus. That's very important for memory. So what we know is that dementia, it's very heterogeneous in the oldest old. So Alzheimer's disease, even though it's still important, is not the only type of dementia. So what some of the things that we've been able to see is that perhaps because of all the variety of causes of dementia in the oldest old, is that the risk factors for dementia that seem to play a role in younger life don't seem to play a bigger role in the oldest old anymore. Like, for example, we know that maintaining a good vascular health, like hypertension or having hypertension in midlife, for example, we know is related to an increased risk of dementia later in life. That doesn't seem to be the case in the oldest old, and it perhaps even seems that even a person that develops hypertension much later in life actually may be at a lower risk. Interesting. Other things like, for example, the ApoE gene, it's ApoE, it's basically one of the genes that is very related to a higher risk of dementia, sort of the E4 variety of the ApoE gene. It's associated with a higher risk of Alzheimer's disease in people. So what happens in the oldest old is that at that age, it doesn't seem to matter too much. So we actually have people that are the E4 variant of that gene in the oldest old, and they do not have dementia. So it seems like many of these factors do help people avoid dementia earlier, but try to identify what maintains or what helps people stay free of dementia later in life. It's been a little bit harder to identify. We still have other things, like, for example, people that stroke, heart disease, those things still play a role very late in life and are still risk factors for dementia at this age. Okay.
Now, if you're just joining us, I'm joined right now by Dr. Maria Corrada, co-principal investigator of the 90+ study here at UCI MIND. And we're talking about factors associated with longevity and dementia in people 90 years and older. If this is your first time joining us, the way it works is you type your questions into the comments box, and Dr. Corrada will answer as many as she has time for. And it looks like we do have a few questions here, so I'm going to address some of these. Our first question is going back to the talk about some of the things that are associated with longevity and protective factors. The question is regarding diet. So whether in regard to alcohol consumption, if there's any difference between red versus white wine, does that matter?
Unfortunately, we were not able to tell that apart. When in the questionnaire that we had, we only had questions about wine or other alcohol, so we were not able to distinguish between white wine or red wine.
Okay.
But what we saw is that whether it was wine or it was other alcohol, actually we had a similar benefit.
Okay.
But we were not able to distinguish between the white and red wine.
Okay. Another question about diet. What about sugar consumption? Sorry if you already mentioned it.
No, I did not mention that. And actually, we don't know if we don't have information about that. We're not able. Unfortunately, the diet questionnaire we had was not very extensive, but we do know that high intake of sugar and especially things related to that, like diabetes, that's definitely very important earlier in life. And the truth is that it seems like not many people that make it into their 90s actually have diabetes. I guess that's a disease that actually has a lot of complications. So not many people make it into their 90s if they've actually had that for very long. But we actually haven't been able to study that very, very well in our age group, unfortunately.
Okay. And lots of questions about diet. I think you did mention this, but this person is asking, have you studied any other types of nutritional supplements besides C, D, and E? Anything about a connection with gut health?
We haven't been. I mean, and that's actually something that we've been trying to. We actually have a questionnaire. It's not a great questionnaire. We actually have a food frequency questionnaire, and we still ask that of our participants. So that's something that we've been wanting to get into. Nutritional research is kind of complicated because it's complicated also by a lot of other things. But it's something that we want to do. We just haven't been able to actually take a look at it very closely yet.
So maybe some future.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and if we have anybody, any collaborators or any colleagues or any students that actually are interested in looking at that, I mean, we're definitely willing to, and we want to collaborate with anybody that wants to use our data and look at our data to do research.
That's great. Answer more questions that way.
Absolutely, yes.
Here's a question about risk factors. This visitor says, thank you so much for doing this live video. It might not be the focus of your particular study, the 90+ study, but she's found that many family members thought that their loved one's dementia was because of very stressful life events that happened to the family. Do you have any experience studying that, or do you think it could be one of the causes of dementia?
It's possible, and I think maybe, I think this question that we had in terms of positive attitude, that doesn't necessarily get a stressful life, but I guess you could potentially say that a person that has a lot of stressful events, potentially may have a different outlook in life. We haven't been able to. That's a question that comes up a lot. There's a lot of people that in our study, particular, that sort of have sort of that same belief. Unfortunately, we're limited to studying the things that we were able to collect earlier on, and in our study. But that's something that we could potentially start looking at later.
Okay. Now, going back to these risk factors, you mentioned that age is the single greatest risk factor for dementia. Does that mean then, and this is the topic of our episode today, does that mean that all people, if they live long enough, will they get Alzheimer's disease or another form of dementia?
So it's hard to answer. I guess in one way that you can say is that unfortunately age is still the strongest risk factor for dementia. So the older a person is, the higher the risk, definitely. But we do have a lot of people in our study that actually have made it into this age and their cognition is intact. Actually, we have some centenarians that come into the study, and every single time they ace their test, their memory test, and they perform at very, very high levels. So it's very possible to actually make it to this age without dementia and without any kind of problems. We even have people that are part of our study that then when they come to autopsy, the pathologist looks at their brain and they actually find almost no abnormalities, no Alzheimer's disease, no vascular disease. Their brains look very, very healthy. Wow. So it's possible, and I guess that's what we call resistance. So basically they're resistant to these abnormalities. And other people that even in spite of actually having some of these abnormalities in the brain, especially the brain full of plaques and tangles, still during life they were doing exceptionally well. So it is still very possible at this age to, even though the risk is still higher at this age, it's still very possible to make it to this age and not have dementia, or even if they have the abnormalities related to that, still function very well and somehow be able to withstand the effects of these abnormalities in the brain and still function very well.
Yeah, so age isn't the only factor.
Age is definitely not the only factor, and so those are some of the things that we're trying to identify. What are those factors that actually help people sort of get to that age very healthy?
Yeah, and it looks like you've discovered a lot of things, and we kind of talked about this already, but what you mentioned, I don't know if you use the word resilience, but resistance, I think is what you said. So like, what is different about these people who don't get dementia in older age? What is helping them become more resistant or resilient, do you think? What are your theories?
Yeah, so that's actually a very good question. That's actually one of the very active parts of our research. I guess what we call resistant is basically not being able to, or a person that actually does not develop these sort of brain abnormalities, so they're resistant to these pathologies. And resilient, we use, or I guess the field is starting to use that term to say, even in the presence of these abnormalities in the brain, they're still performing very well, or they're performing better than you would expect them, given what's accumulated in their brain in terms of plaques and tangles and other abnormalities. So some of the things that we know, for example, is that higher education seems to actually be related to both. A person with a higher education actually seems to be less likely to develop some of these abnormalities, and also in the presence of these abnormalities also perform better. Some other genetic components that we have seen in the past, for example, the E2 variant of the ApoE gene, it seems that people that have that variant, they may actually be able to perform well, even in the presence of Alzheimer's disease pathology. So that might be a factor that contributes to what we call the resilience. So being able to sort of maintain cognitive abilities even in the presence of these abnormalities. So, but that's still an area of very active work in our group, trying to figure it out.
I hope that you're able to answer those questions. It'd be very interesting and informative, I would think, for the whole field. A couple more questions here from our attendees. What is the percentage of your population, so in the 90 plus, that does not have dementia?
So I think it depends on the age. Again, it's very age dependent. So in general, when we look at our 90-year-olds, so people that make it into their 90s without dementia, so about in their early 90s, about 10% or so of the people actually do develop dementia every year. In the mid 90s is more about 20%. In the hundreds or more centenarians, it's closer to about 40% per year they develop dementia. So overall, when we look at the overall in their 90s, I think it's about I think close to, again, it's age dependent, but I think close to about half of the people actually do have dementia in their 90s.
Okay.
Or over 90.
Okay. Now, with the 90 plus study, there's just so much potential, so many questions to ask and be answered. What are some of your personal future goals with the 90 plus study?
Yeah, so I think some of the things that we're doing now, so one of the things that I want to mention is that we're still enrolling in our study. We have actually expanded our study to actually include people that are not originally part of that Leisure World cohort study. So anybody that's in their 90s that's willing and able to do imaging studies, because we're doing a lot of imaging studies right now, PET imaging, MRIs. So anybody that's willing and able that lives in the area can join our study if they want to participate in research. And some of the things that we're trying to do is, again, so trying to identify some of these factors that are related to resistance and resilience. And other things, and some of our collaborators in our group are working actively also on trying to figure out, because a lot of these things that I mentioned before, like microinfarct, hippocampal sclerosis, we can't really diagnose that during life. Right now, the only way to do it is by looking at brain tissue. So we're trying to figure out, can we identify characteristics either by the patterns of how they answer some of their answers, their tests, their cognitive tests, or maybe through some advanced imaging modalities or more advanced imaging techniques, can we actually see that, and can we actually identify those conditions during life? So that's something that we're actively working on right now. Okay. So we're still enrolling. So anybody that has that's interested and wants to be part of the study, please contact us.
Okay. Now I just want to end on, we have a few more minutes. What I always like to learn from our investigators who are so dedicated to this research, what got you involved in this field in the first place? How did you end up here, and why do you stick around?
Yes, at first, actually, honestly, I started working right after my master's program with Claudia Kaywas. I mean, I've been working with her now for 27 years now. She hired me right after my master's program. She was actually doing a study, a similar study in the East Coast, in Baltimore, looking at risk and protective factors for Alzheimer's disease. I started working with her, and I got very interested in the work that she was doing, and I went back to school to get better at it and try to contribute more. And then when she moved here, I moved here too. To start this 90+ study, because we saw an important opportunity to learn about this segment of the population that was not being studied. Yeah. And also, like many of us, then eventually Alzheimer's disease and dementia also affected our lives. I mean, my grandmother actually has been living with, she's 102 right now, lives in Puerto Rico. She's been living with the disease for 15 years. So we all have our personal stories too that tie us to this condition, and we are all working together to try to see if we can help and figure out ways to avoid it or cure it if possible.
Well, thank you for all that you're doing. And we do have one more question here that I want to get to. He was asking if you could talk about volunteering for research. So what types of ages or other profile factors might you be looking for? So of course you're looking for individuals 90 and older. Yes. And if you're not 90 yet, are there research volunteer opportunities for people with dementia in their family history?
Absolutely. And Chelsea can probably talk a lot more about that. UCI MIND definitely has a lot of research going on at all ages and all abilities. There's opportunities. We in particular are doing research on oldest old. So, but in reality, I mean, even if the oldest old, even if the participants are 90 and older, I mean, the relatives are actually helping us quite a bit in our research as well. We actually get a lot of information from the relatives. So we do need the help of not only the people over 90, but also the people that care for them and the people that are around them, their study partners, to actually help us. But yes, that UCI MIND has a lot of opportunities.
So if you're not over 90 and still interested in participating in research in dementia and Alzheimer's disease, UCI MIND launched a few years ago an online registry called the UCI Consent to Contact, or C2C registry. And what you can do is you can go online. Kirsten is going to go ahead and post here the link for you. You can go online, put in your email, and you'll get an email inviting you to fill out a short health information survey online that's completely secure and confidential. You'll indicate your preferences for research, and then you might be contacted about a study that you are potentially eligible for as they come up in the future. And then lastly, regarding the 90+ study, are you enrolling participants in other geographic areas such as Coachella Valley and Palm Springs?
So what we do is that because we're doing a lot of our imaging studies, and the imaging studies have to be local, if they're willing and able to come here and come here to do the imaging studies, we can provide transportation. They're welcome to come, but they also have to agree to be part of our study long term and be seen every 6 months. And so as long as they're willing to travel, or yes, they can enroll in our study.
Okay, great. So thank you so much again, Dr. Corrada, for joining me today.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of our viewers who attended live, asked some excellent questions. If you'd like to learn more about Dr. Corrada's research and the 90+ study in UCI MIND, you can visit our website at www.mind.uci.edu. I mentioned the registry, which the link is there in the comments field. And we hope to see you for our final Facebook Live episode of 2019. It's the first Friday of December, December 6th, and I will be joined by Dr. Ira Lott, who is the director of UCI MIND's Down syndrome program, another unique cohort that we, the individuals that we study here at UCI MIND, and we look forward to talking with the Facebook community about that. So thank you, and we hope to see you next time. Take care.